Good evening, everybody. I am 𝗀𝗲𝗍. It is great to see you. We have our Thursday talks. I talk about Pitranomics, which is my strategy to grow, protect, and transfer wealth. So there are 10 parts to this strategy, and tonight we're going to talk about the get professional help part of the strategies. Anyway, the important thing to accomplishing your goals in life is to first establish those really important end-of-life goals. Those are the ones I call EOLs, because if at the moment you are facing the crossing over, what would you regret not accomplishing? What would you feel that would have given your life purpose if you had done it? Or what do you feel is causing your life to lack purpose because you didn't do it? Those are the really important things you need to get down, write down, talk about with your significant other, and just figure out if that's what you want to dedicate your life to doing. Once you establish those end-of-life goals, then you have to do what's an assessment of the resources you have available to accomplish those goals. And the ones I focus on are money, energy, and time, because all of those are finite. Doesn't matter how rich you are, you have a finite amount of money that you have to allocate towards your goals. And if you are extremely young, well, again, life doesn't last forever, so you have a finite amount of time. And the thing about that is you really don't know how much time you have, unless you do something about it. But generally speaking, you don't know how much time you have in your life. And then the last thing is energy. And that's a little harder for people to get their heads around, but after you've done all the required things to survive, work, pay your bills, interact with your family, clean, whatever it is, how much energy do you have to dedicate to those goals you've decided are important? And what I find, I say this all the time, once you've established those end-of-life goals and you've taken an assessment of what resources you have available to accomplish those goals, it becomes really, really, really easy to prioritize what you should do in your life and what you should let drop. Now, once you've established those goals, you have to decide how to get there. And part of what Pitranomics does, that second section, is called How Do You Eat an Elephant? That's one step, one bite at a time, not one step. That means you set for these long-term goals, these interim milestones, so that you know that you're on track to accomplishing that really big life goal. And it's important to give your life the purpose and the intentionality so that you get these things done. But in accomplishing those goals, I'm going to talk about the get professional help. And I would really, really appreciate some interaction here, because I won't necessarily see what you're saying in the text. So please speak up, let me know what you're thinking. One of the things people might need in their lives is an attorney. They will most likely need an insurance agent. They might take the time to connect with an investment advisor. All of these types of people are professionals designed to help you accomplish your goals. They can't help you if you don't know what they are, and you can't really choose unless you know where you're going and what you need to get there. So let's start with, let's see, which one do I want to start with? I'm going to start with an investment advisor. Mainly because there are so many people that call themselves financial planners, investment advisors, financial coaches, whatever they call themselves. They could be the best at what they do and still be of absolutely no use to you. Hold on. Sorry, my phone was on. I want to make sure that's important. It doesn't matter how competent somebody is at doing something that has absolutely no use for you. So when we talk about the financial gurus, who are the types to help you? I'll give a personal example. When my husband and I had young kids, we met a lovely couple that gave us some advice to seek an investment advisor and gave the recommendation of one that they'd had for years and years, and that advisor was awesome, helped them make money and grow, whatever. So my husband and I were excited, and we go make an appointment and we go and speak with her, only to find out she had a minimum amount of investable assets that she required in her clients. So while she was really good at what she did, she wasn't good for people like what we were, who had no money or very little money. That wasn't her forte, working with people who were trying to get to a big sum of investable assets. So our needs were different than the people from whom we'd gotten that recommendation. So it's really important. It is so important that when you seek professional help, you get someone that can help where you are right now get to where you want to be. So, and the converse is true. You can't really have someone who's saying, well, you need to use pay cash only and do the Dave Ramsey and not pay for anything. If they're already abundantly wealthy, those aren't appropriate tools for them. Let me admit somebody. Let me also see if I can make you the host now. Nope, still can't do it. Where was I going with that? Yes, so with financial advisors, once you've gone through the establishment of your goals, and once you've assessed what your resources are, including money, and a guess at how much time you have, then you can help narrow down what that financial planner should do for you. So let's say, for example, I'm just throwing numbers off the top of my head. You're a young man, about 25 years old, making $50,000 a year. And you're not married, but you want to be. You don't have kids yet, but you do want some. You'd like to be able to support them and send them to school once you have these kids that you haven't had yet. And you'd like to be able to pass these future kids on, let's say $1 million each in some kind of investable asset that will pay an annuity to them once you've gone. Most people who are, say, 23, 25 years of age, making $50,000 a year, just cannot fathom how do you get to that point where by the end of life, you've lived a good life, you've raised good kids, you have money to leave behind. That's where the compatibility needs to come in. And so you need to learn how to ask questions. So for example, when speaking with a financial advisor, you might ask them, what is the financial profile of most of the people that you're working with? Because those are going to be the people that we hope they're good at working with. Those are the kinds of people they're attracting. You might want to ask them how do they determine what kind of risk versus reward profile is appropriate for their clients, so that you have an idea what basis they're using that risk versus reward or risk versus return profile for you, which in turn describes what kind of assets they're going to recommend for you, what type of investments, which will in turn decide how fast your portfolio is going to grow. So when you're young and you don't need your investable assets and you want to sock them away, you want that stuff to grow through the stratosphere. You understand that there's volatility in high return assets, but you're saying, fine, I have enough time to grow. I think the overall of my portfolio is going to take me from here to here. Well, let's say you get around age 45. Maybe that's when your kids are going to school, and so you need to be able to draw those assets, and they need to be conservatively invested so that you know that they're there for your kids to go to school and graduate on. You shift your investment profile a little bit. Hopefully your investment advisor is the kind of person that not only can take you from like 0 to 60, but can keep taking you from 60 to say 75. And in my experience, most of them aren't. They're either really good at the high risk investments, or they're really good at the conservative investments, or they have a team of people, some that are good at the risky, some that are good at the conservative, and they can transition you to another team. That would be awesome. You stay within the same organization with the same structure. Maybe you have a relationship with a customer-focused person that knows not maybe what to do for your investment portfolio, but who to direct you to for the next stage in your life. And so that's another good thing to consider, not just the person that you're talking to, but what kind of support structure and organization they have available. So now once your kids are in college, you're thinking, ooh, we want to make sure that we've also kept up with our retirement goals, because you're, say, 45, you're not done, but you need to start focusing, because say you want to retire at 50 or at 60 or whatever age you'd like to retire. That's when your assets need to start transferring into something more stable, something that will enable you to have those assets, not be upset by unnecessary market risk. You can't really do much about things like COVID. There's just, you can't predict for that. But what you can hope for is that over the long run, things will even out. And that's what you're preparing for, the likely things. You can't really plan for unpredictable completely. So now that I've talked a little bit about one of the steps you want to do or take to get a financial coach, that's how matched they are to your risk versus return profile and helping you accomplish your goals, you have to be able to communicate with them. There are certain types of people who are very analytical. They want the numbers to make sense. They want an extensive amount of detail in the company, in the statistics and strategy for picking the stocks. Maybe they want someone who can explain all of these theorems and things about stocks. So that's not me. That's my husband. My husband and our investment advisor could talk ad infinitum about, I don't even know, because it's not my thing. It's not what I enjoy. But when it comes down to who can be a good mentor for me in growing my real estate investing career, that same investment advisor is very good for me, because that's where I want to get down into the nitty-gritty and the analytics and the predictions and all that. So this one investment advisor, now he has a team, but this particular one, when talking to my husband and me, he meets my husband on the analytical level where my husband needs to be to feel confident to take his advice in investing stocks and bonds or whatever they have. But he also has that same ability to get knee deep into the details to help me understand what it is I need to do and predict for my real estate business. So for my husband and me, we are both analytical, detail oriented, and maybe just a wee bit of control freaks. So our current, stop it, David. So our current investment advisor fits the both of us to a T in personality, not just in his competence, but also in his personality. Now, when my husband and I were at first, my husband's name is Andre, by the way, I'll call him Dre. When we started shopping for investment advisors, we went to a number of the, oh gosh, I can't remember them. I know American Express and Edward Jones and another one that's on the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember. And we talked to all of these people. And this is what I learned when you walk in off the street to speak to a financial coach or an investment advisor. If you walk in off the street with no connections, no recommendations, they send you to the new people who are just cutting their teeth on that industry. Now, maybe that's someone you want to invest your financial future in. Maybe it's not. I don't know. You need to know. But for Julie, there was one office in particular that we walked into, and the young man was telling us all the things that we needed to do. And I had children late in life. So while my kids were young, I was like 40 something. And this young man in his 20s with his really cool, expensive haircut and his fancy watch and his well-cut suit was talking about all the things we needed to do to make sure we had a financially stable future. And so I looked at him and I was like, well, you know, are you married? Do you have any kids? Do you have your own house? Do you have any assets? If so, how have they performed? May I see the evidence of this? And none of those questions were answered to my satisfaction. So I got up and left. I was like, this guy is not going to waste my time. Remember, I think time is very crucial, so I'm not going to waste it. I was like, I'm done. I can go sleep in the car rather than talk to this guy. But the one that we eventually hired is a very good listener. So when we talked about our goals, his body language was amazing. He would look at us when we were talking, and then when he wanted to talk, he would sit back and relax, as you know, affecting this contemplative mane. And then he would say, well, have you considered this? Or what about this? He had a wealth of anecdotal information for us to understand the very detailed guidance he was giving us. And so that personality works well just with both my husband and me. It might not work for everybody, and there's nothing wrong with that. If you're sitting there talking to your investment advisor and you are yawning and bored and you want to leave, that is not the one for you, because this topic is so important that I want you to be interested, excited, and engaged with the person that you choose, because that person is emotionally, well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm emotionally invested in them because I'm emotionally connected to my money. So that's why, for me, it's important to be connected to that person. So let's think about that. They have to have the competence to get you from where you are to where you need to be. They have to have the personality so that you engage with them. Well, what else do they need to have? The competence, the engagement. They need to have what I often call a going concern. So here's the thing about some financial managers or advisors or whatever. Let's say you go to TD Ameritrade and you find this guy and he's really great. And he's been with TD Ameritrade about 5 years. Well, some companies like that have a really high turnover. So what happens when you form this relationship with your investment advisor, and then 3, 4, 5 years down the road, the company where he works isn't helping him to grow? Well, he's out, he's gone. Where's he gone? You don't know. And now you're stuck with trying to find somebody else, usually with very little notice. So it is important for you to find out, okay, what are your investment advisors' long-term plans for being available for you? Because investment and financial advice is not a one and done. It's an ongoing, really personal relationship that you want to have going on for a long time. And also you want that person to have some backup. If your financial advisor is 75 years old and you're 30 and you trust his advice, who's coming up behind him to continue what it is he's starting? So that's a lot of information about financial advisors. I will say that I really, really like the one that we have. He's detail oriented. We meet quarterly. He's available for questions, not only relating to our particular financial advice, but I ask him questions about real estate. I ask him questions about how all these things fit in. He's more than willing to talk to other professionals in my life, my CPA or whatever. And that's important because all of these professionals that are working on your behalf should be able to collaborate on your behalf. A lot of people don't think about that. Your financial advisor and your CPA should be able to talk because he's doing a lot of stuff over here that's creating taxable events for you. Your CPA should be able to communicate, hey, let's plan for doing this in the next year. Let's think about having, okay, we're going to recharacterize their traditional IRAs into Roth next year because I anticipate, these are the kinds of conversation those professionals need to have with each other, and for which I'm thankful my professionals can have with each other. Does anyone on Zoom have a question or wants to share a story about financial advisors, financial coaches, any of that kind of stuff? Okay, I'm going to start calling on somebody because I like interaction.
No, David here. I agree with you because when I was in the financial service industries, that's exactly what happened. They put everybody who walked in the door with the new people who didn't know anything, and that's not really what you want. And most people walk right back out.
Right back out, yep. And did they have any program to train the new people so that they became knowledgeable financial advisors or partnered them with the more senior advisors or anything like that?
Yes, but that takes time. And that's one of the hardest things to do in the financial services industry, is to build a book of business that trusts you. That is really hard. And the other problem is that they're pushing their products. You know, they're always pushing their life insurance products, their annuities, or their IULs, whatever it might be, whatever the flavor of the month is, with the best return. And that's what makes it hard to find a solid financial advisor.
You know what? Thank you for mentioning that about the financial advisors or investment advisors, whatever, selling their own products. What happens, or can happen, doesn't always happen, is that there's a conflict of interest. If you're any kind of a salesperson and you have different products, you know that there are some that generate greater return than others. And it is completely understandable if you're pushing people toward a product that has a greater reward for you as a salesperson, whether or not it has the greatest reward for the person that you are buying it on their behalf. So here's something that I think people should do. Remember, I talked about risk versus return. It is very understand that you understand where you are on that profile and what you predict your returns over a certain period should be. And at least every year, look back and see if you are accomplishing those returns. And if you're not, why not? Has there been something completely unforeseen that happened? Because if not, your investment advisor isn't hitting the mark for you, which means it's time to rethink if that is an appropriate person for you. So you need to talk about things. I go back to the COVID situation, right? A lot of people lost some traction in their investment portfolio between 2020 and now. They're recovering now. Some businesses are recovering, but your investment advisor should kind of have some macroeconomic experience so that they understand what these perturbations in the world have as an effect on financial markets. So we actually did pretty well throughout COVID, and we also did pretty well in 2007, 2008 for a different reason. We were solid cash in 2007. We started investing 2007, 2008. So when things started rebounding, it looked like, oh my God, it was awesome. But we had missed that downturn. We came in at down and then we went up. So we were very happy about that. But if they are selling you their products, please make sure you ask a lot of questions. They should give you the results of your risk versus return profile, number of questions you have to answer. They're pretty standard, and they'll tell you, you have the profile and you're good with this kind of investment, blah, blah, blah. And then from there, you get kind of placed in what you want to invest. But if they're only, say, selling high risk products and you're a low risk person, then you're not in the right place. So you need to move on either to an independent financial advisor that can buy just about anything, or to someone who is more matched to where you need to be at the time. Okay.
Question.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So on the Edward Jones commercials, they say they're a fiduciary versus or Fisher Investments, but whichever one it is. So what is the difference between a fiduciary and let's say just a financial services representative?
Good question. The kind of advice you can get can run the gamut. It can go between your assets being in a brokerage that this investment advisor manages and manipulates for you on your behalf, and then they take a fee, right? Or they can invest for your assets into products that they are paid not explicitly, but implicitly through the returns of that fund or whatever. Or you can have those that just tell you, hey, it's Q3, it's time for you to reshift your profile and you need to move this from here and this from here, and they don't do anything. They tell you what to do and you better do it. The fiduciary means that they are taking your best interest at heart. So all of those people could have fiduciary responsibility, but some have actual active control over your assets. But they should all have a fiduciary duty for your best interest. Now, here's the thing about fiduciary duty, and let's not forget, these are still people doing the best they can. So it's always good to stay in touch with how your investment advisor is doing personally, because I have found that with any kind of professional relationship, when their personal life goes off the rail, so does their professional competency. And while I would certainly like to be understanding of people that go off the rails personally, and I am understanding, I'm not so understanding when it affects me financially. So then it's time, be quiet, David. Then it's time to just take those assets out and move them over into somewhere else. Now, I would consider coming back if that person gets on track, but I'm going to ask, you know, when you walk into your professional's office or get on the phone, how are you? How's your mom? How's your dad? Did your so-and-so have that surgery? Your kid's doing okay? You know, stay on top of that, because that, I hate to say it like that, but come on now. If you don't look at the signs, if you just don't look at them, well, whose fault is it if things go down the drain? You know, I did know of a person, I don't know this particular financial advisor, but I know of a person who was involved in this fund that was generating these amazing returns. They were like, this was 6 or 7 years ago. They had a day trading plant somewhere in South America, and these people were just like trading, generating between 1% and 5% per month. And so everybody was really happy about those returns. And sometimes, now, for the most part, it was between 1 and 5. At that time, they were like between 22 to 24% return per month on the assets they were managing. And we went in to talk to them, and I was like, oh, this is pretty exciting. And my husband, I could tell by his body language, he was like, because, oh, one of the things that they said was, well, there aren't any losses. We have these stops in places. And my husband was looking at these massive spreadsheets and said, well, what about that loss right there? And the guy was like, well, that's an anomaly. And my husband was like, yeah, okay. So I don't really understand in practice these complicated financial instruments. I understand them in theory. I took the classes, but I've never had to use them. In any case, fast forward about 1.5 years, I think that the plant of day traders were doing very well, but what they decided was all of this money should be ours, and they absconded with all of it. Millions and millions of people's dollars gone. And the guy in the US who was over this company, this hedge fund, he called it, and overseeing the plant of people doing the investment, well, he is now residing in a small room with metal accoutrement. So those are the kinds of things that happen. You have to pay attention. I think what happened with him is he was going through some personal difficulty, and he took his focus off what his team was doing. His team knew he took the focus off what they were doing, and they took advantage of it. So that's what I believe happened. Now, he's suffering for it. He may have done some other things as well, but that was a big thing that made quite a few people angry. And if you really want to Google it, it was in the news. Any other questions about financial coaches or investment advisors? Oh, what's the difference between a financial coach and an investment advisor? You ask? No one did? Sorry. So an investment advisor is actually telling you what to do with accumulated assets that you have. So they are advising you on your investments. A financial coach can give you a lot of insight and direction, not only into what your investments should be doing, but how you're saving, what your savings goal should be, how much money you need to accomplish a particular goal. And they're really good at the planning softwares. So they can do a lot of scenario analysis for you. The investment advisor is trying to full on maximize your investment realization. The financial coach is trying to help you optimize the types of activities you need to participate in, as well as the financial planner, in order to accomplish the goals that you want. And they use rules of thumbs like, you know, what is it? Inflation is 3.5%. The average return on this type of property or type of asset is 8%. So if you put those numbers in, then you should be here. So basically, he provides the vision. The investment advisor delivers, hopefully over delivers. Okay, so what is somebody else that you might need? That's very important, and that's a CPA. Does everybody know exactly what a CPA does? Can I get someone on the Zoom to tell me what a CPA does?
File your taxes.
That's one of the things that they do. Yes, they can file your taxes.
They also do bookkeeping so that you're on track for filing your taxes.
They can do bookkeeping. Yes, they can do bookkeeping. A lot of times, especially if they're expensive, they won't. They'll suggest that you hire a bookkeeper that does that function for less. But yes, they can do bookkeeping.
Yeah, I would say someone who has been trained in that specific area, which is held as a certified person to be involved in those type of activities. Someone who goes into a deeper dive than someone like at H&R Block to do more simple transactions with your taxes, and someone who would provide more due diligence and research to protect you during the process of taxes or businesses that you're involved in are personal.
Okay, I think all of you hit on it a little bit, but an accountant wants to make sure that all of the ledgers balance, make sense, and tell a story that seems representative of what's going on. It doesn't mean that the story they're seeking to say is necessarily the story you want them or your books or financial documents to say. They are very good at being objective and precise about what goes where, what numbers make sense. And here are the financial documents that every person should understand to some extent. You should understand your profit and loss statement. Even if you aren't a business person, you should have a profit and loss statement for your family. All the money that goes in, all the expenses that come out, and what's your net movement in cash, okay? You should have a basic understanding of what a statement of cash flows is and what it says. And then you should also have an understanding of your balance sheet. So let's start with the balance sheet. Everybody has probably heard the expression, this person is worth such and such amount of money, right? And a lot of times they'll stop with, they own $1 million house. I'm just going to make this up. $1 million house, $100,000 car, and another $500,000 in personal assets. So they're worth 1.6 million. But they're not, because chances are they have a loan against the house and a loan against the car, and maybe they've paid for some of those assets that they have with credit cards. So their net worth is the sum of all of their assets less all of their liabilities or debts that they owe. So sometimes you'll see that person with that $1 million house and that $100,000 car and those $500,000 worth of assets, and they're only worth $100,000, meaning their net worth, the net of their assets and their liabilities is $100,000. Now that's an unfortunate situation because they're just one major disruption away from bankruptcy. The statement of cash flows helps you understand. If you look at it, you will see that sometimes you have this much cash, sometimes you have this much cash, sometimes you have this much cash, whatever. When you see the zero line, if you go below that, that means your net cash is negative. and you are either in financial distress or you're incurring debt. If you're down here incurring debt, then you have a cost of capital that you also have to overcome to get back up on the positive side. So if you're running a business or you're running a family or you're running anything, you need to make sure you understand the statement of cash flows and use those numbers to predict when you will need large sums of cash. For example, if you have a home loan and you do not escrow your taxes and insurance, then once a year your taxes are due, and generally once or twice a year your insurance is due. That's one big lump sum. So you have to save up so you can pay your taxes. So that money goes out, cash goes down, and then you keep saving so that you are ready to pay again. That's what your escrow company or your escrow account is for with your mortgage. They take, there's a principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. They take the taxes and insurance contribution each month, and then they pay your taxes and insurance, which drops that escrow down, but they make sure they keep a little cushion. So when you look at your escrow analysis, there's a minimum amount they want that account to be at in their projections. So they're trying to keep that little cushion. So you go all the way up and they pay your amount, you don't hit that cushion, and then you keep going, and then they drop it again. And let's say you sell your house or you refinance, then that little cushion comes back to you. They send it to you, but then with a new loan or whatever, you start again. So the banks are trying to do their level best to make sure that the cash flow of your taxes and insurance is more than managed with an appropriate cushion by your escrow contribution. That is how you should look at your cash flow management on a personal level. Don't allocate every square inch of what you make into spending. Make sure you're accumulating. First thing you should do is have and I know I'm going off topic a little bit, but you should have a 6-month or a year cushion so that if something happens, you lose your job, or maybe you wreck your car and the insurance doesn't cover, it's going to take a while or whatever, you have enough cash to cover emergencies, and you have enough cash to cover 6 months or to a year of living in case something happens. The CPA can talk you through all of those documents. The balance sheet that shows your net worth, the statement of cash flows, which can help you predict when you're going to go into a financial distress situation, and the income statement, which helps you decide how much money you're actually making. So when you're running your family, when you're running your business, you should always be able to understand those documents. And then when you get, competent at reading your own, go look at some of these complicated business financial statements. They're lots of fun. So there's one particular company I read because they have the most ridiculously obtuse financial statements. I couldn't tell what was going on where. They were hiding. Anyway, we won't say that. Their money was not easy for me to track. And I do know how to read financial statements. But a CPA wants to make sure those and other financial statements and reports are precise and reflect what is actually going on. That is basically what a CPA wants to do. Make sure that story is complete. So when you say he files your taxes, yes, he does. He puts all the little dots, all the money in all the little pockets, and then he's like, okay, return on from some software, here's your return, right? That's what your normal CPA does. There are CPAs that are tax strategists. I don't care how much or how little you make, try to talk to those at least once a year and have in your mind, this is how much I plan to make, when and how. I would like to know how to mitigate taxes, because the strategy has to come before the money hits your wallet or becomes a tax event, not after. Once it hits, you have a lot fewer choices, but before you can decide how it hits. And especially if you're a business person, so you can take advantage of leverage and timing, and if necessary, inventory management. All of those things go into helping you and your tax strategist plan how you're going to make your money in the coming year. Any questions about, go ahead.
So the best way to say that would be that a CPA makes sure that what you are doing is legal and fits within the tax code, the current changes of the tax code, to make sure that you are making the best decisions possible.
A CPA tries to accurately reflect what is going on according to generally accepted accounting principles.
Yes.
Whether or not it's legal or not is not so much their concern as that it's accurate and truthful and according to generally accepted accounting practices.
Okay. So the other question I typed in was, how does that apply to the different properties paying for expenses? Since you went into the whole cash flow, kind of have to delve into that as well.
One more time, the properties paying for what properties?
Last week we were talking about this mortgage is paying for that, or this property is paying for this expense.
Yes. Okay, so that is a strategy that some investors take. When you buy or sell a piece of real estate, we'll talk about that. This also applies to stocks. When you buy or sell, those are taxable events. When you buy it, you establish your cost basis. When you sell it, you realize your gain or loss. Now, if you don't speak to someone before you buy and then sell it, then what you have are fixed numbers that you have something to do with. But what I was saying is, if you have a property that's either appreciating in value and or decreasing in its loan to value because you're paying it down through rental payments, at some point you're going to have this massive amount of equity. You could sell the property, incurring a tax event, or you could refinance that property, getting that equity out, which is not a tax event. It does not show up on the income statement. It shows up on the balance sheet. So what you get is a reduction in that asset value and an increase in cash, but you haven't realized any income. Now the money is actually in your tight little fist. You can do what you want. You can spend it. You can buy another real estate property, whatever. But that particular incident does not incur a taxable event. So when I said I would use a property to pay for expenses, that's another layer. I said, instead of buying a car cash, I used the cash to buy an asset that would pay for the car note that I took. And once the car note was completed, I still had this income producing asset. Now, those cash flows are income. The rent that you get versus less your expenses, that's income. And I'm constantly playing with those numbers too. But the equity that you create, either through appreciation or paying down your note, to access that money is a non-taxable event at the moment. We don't know if changes are going to happen, but as of right now, those are non-taxable events. Did that explain that?
To
David,
me, that did, but I want to make sure that everybody else understands what you just said. If there's any other questions, please speak up now, because now's the time to do a deep dive into that.
Yeah, one of the things, I will just say this real quick before someone asks a question. It's not just important how much money you make. It's how much money you're able to keep from the money you make, and how much money you make from making that money that you make work for you even further. So if you can keep more of the money you make, and you can accurately deploy and effectively deploy that money into making more money, well, now you're on the path to true growth. To simplify that, you go to your job and you make your income and you save your money. And when you save your money, you put your money into an annuity. And there are many types of annuities, but we'll just say it's an annuity that pays 8% a year. Okay. Now, that particular annuity, you put it in, and the actual disbursements, the 8% that they give you, those are taxable, right? So you take, let's say in order to get that annuity, you had to travel to France and stay in an expensive hotel and eat expensive food in France. Well then, and you had to do that in order to get that annuity. Well, that would offset the income from the annuity with the expenses it took to get the annuity. So that decreases your income from the annuity. And that's sound and acceptable tax strategy to offset expenses against income. There's nothing illegal about it as long as you're not illegally applying expenses. This is where the tax strategist comes in, because they can tell you what sort of expenses to get into to offset. So then you're working on income. Let's say you have this annuity and you're earning really big income, and you take that income and say, you know what, I'm going to put that into another asset that's making money. And you're going to live on the returns of that. So that's living on the returns of the asset. Now, if you can put yourself in a position, and this is my guideline. You're not living off your income. You're not living off the returns of your assets. You're not even living off the returns of your assets. You need to get down to living off the returns of your assets, or at least trying to get there enough for your heirs to get there. Any questions about that?
Can you give an example of that?
Yes. So let's say you make money and you're like, I save money and I buy an investment house, and let's say I buy that investment house in cash. Let's say I don't get a loan against it, but let's say I buy it in cash. Well, then I take, I was like, wow, okay, I bought this investment house in cash, but it shot up in price. So I take a loan out on that investment. I still make sure it's cash flowing, not so big a loan that's not covered by the amount of rent that I can take. And I go and I put that money into another asset, which is making returns. So those returns would be living off the returns of an asset. Oh, sorry, off the returns of an asset. You can keep stepping that even further and then take the returns of that next one and plow them into another asset that's producing income. Not a depreciating asset, but an income producing asset. So for example, I bought some properties back in 2015 that appreciated enough in value that I could take the money out and put them not into other properties cash, but put them into other properties with leverage. So now I've magnified the ability to buy properties by taking the growth of this asset to fund the stepping into another asset. Those assets are not only income producing assets, but appreciating assets. Even if the price doesn't appreciate, I am taking the difference between what I paid for the property less the chipping away at the loan of the rent, so what the tenant's supplying. So I'm creating more equity. If it also appreciates at the same time, then in a shorter time, I can take that money out in the form of a loan and do the exact same thing and plow it into another asset with leverage, and then live off the income of that third generation asset. So you can stack real estate like that. You can stack different classes of assets. So for example, I'm now investing in crypto, and my plan is to take that crypto that I make money on and buy more real estate.
Okay, but you have to make sure that can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay.
I can hear you now.
But now you have to make sure that you are cash flowing appropriately. Because if the cash flow is not appropriate, then that all tumbles. And when she says leverage, that means a loan, a bank loan or whatever kind of loan. And that's what the leverage means, because you're taking the proceeds from whatever asset one is, and you're taking that portion as a down payment or as an investment portion into the second one, and that needs to be correctly set up. But you also need to make sure that the cash flow is correct, because if the cash flow isn't correct, then it becomes a house of cards.
It does. And that's where your tolerance for risk comes in, and to what percentage of leverage you're okay with your portfolio having. So there are investors that are comfortable with 85 to 90% leverage, and there are investors that are more comfortable with 50% leverage, and there are investors that aren't comfortable with any leverage whatsoever. That is a personal choice. There's just, you can't tell somebody this is what you should do without understanding their tolerance for risk and their goals. But as long as, and this is where the statement of cash flows comes in, you stress test your cash flows. What happens if this tenant doesn't pay? What happens if this house burns to the ground? What happens if I get laid off and I can't fund some of this other stuff in my personal life, so I now have to live on these assets? All of those what if scenarios need to happen when you're stress testing your cash flows. Does that make sense? Hello, hello, hello. Okay, so I am a real big fan of having the advice of a tax strategist. Oh, did you go away from me? Okay. I'm a real big fan of having the advice of a tax strategist, because they can help you predict your statement of cash flows based on your understanding of your business. They can help you optimize your balance sheet, saying, okay, if you want to increase your net worth, keep in mind, when you go to buy a house and you get a loan, they are essentially looking at your net worth and your leverage ratios as to whether or not you'll be a good risk for the loan that they're about to give you. If you're not as good of risk, you don't get the greatest rates, or you don't get the highest loan to value on your personal home. So that means the cost of your capital is more, and you're paying expenses that you wouldn't have to if you had managed your leverage and you had made sure you took taking care of your cash flows. So we've spoken about CPA, we've spoken about investment advisors, coaches. Let's talk about attorneys. Why do most people need attorneys in their lives? For the most part, most people will use them for investment planning, family planning, write their will, or it might in their business help them write their entity documents, or they might, like in my case, be in the middle of a lawsuit and need a litigator. Or they might have some contracts that need to be drawn up, or they might need someone to analyze their work contracts so that they can help them negotiate better deals with the company that they're trying to get work from. This was more common like 10 years ago. You actually negotiated your work contract. If you were an executive, I'm not sure what's happening now, but there were so many perks and non-compete clauses, all of those things you needed to stay on top of before you started working for that company. It's the same thing with anything else. You have to have an attorney that is competent in helping you do what you are hiring him to do. This is the problem with word of mouth attorneys. So somebody will say, well, do you know a good attorney? And they'll say, yes, this person was an attorney. Most people don't ask, okay, well, what did that attorney do for you? What that you wanted him to do, did he accomplish for you? So if you're getting a divorce and it is acrimonious, chances are you want that fire-breathing shark on your side of the table. But if you are trying to work with your spouse and develop an estate plan for your loved ones, You want someone collaborative and able to communicate with both sides and has a great understanding of probate and probate law and entity structures, etc. Or if you want someone that's, again, you're in the middle of a lawsuit, well, you want to know that that person is really good at presenting evidence in your favor. And again, the fire-breathing dragon on your side of the table. And hopefully that person has good relationships with judges, lots of positive experience in front of judges, is comfortable with how judges think, because one thing I have learned, it's not enough for you to so-called be right. You've got to have the evidence to prove that you're right. So that attorney needs to help you dig through what you have and present it in the way that does your side the best good. Another reason people might need attorneys, in some states, this is how you buy a house. You don't have a title company. You have an attorney who reviews the contract and makes sure that when you buy this house, you're as protected as you can be when you're buying it. Or if you're selling the house, you're as protected as you can be when you're selling it. So that is an understanding of all things real estate, which is very different than all things estate planning, which is very different from being a litigator. So you definitely need to do your due diligence when working with attorneys. And it's important that you feel comfortable sharing a lot of private information with your attorney. If you don't, chances are you won't share that information if you don't feel comfortable, and then he or she is not as capable as performing for you as you would like for him to. So that's kind of a brief thing, but I'll compare it to doctors. If you have a problem, you're a female and you have a gynecological problem, it doesn't make sense to go see a neurologist, right? And vice versa, if you have a problem going on, say, with your blood, you need to see, what is it, guys? Is it vascular surgeon or physician? Then it doesn't make sense to go see an oncologist unless, of course, they're working together or it is a specialized form of vascular oncology. It is important to make sure that the professionals that you hire are, one, competent, yes, of course. Two, able to get you in particular from where you are now to where you want to be. And three, are affable enough with you personally so you will share the information you need to share in order for them to do best for you, and that you will take their advice once they give it. That is pretty much wrapping up what I wanted to say about professionals. Is there anything that I missed that someone would like for me to go into a little more detail? No? Okay.
Actually, I
Okay.
do, because I don't know if I missed this part when I was letting the dog out, but going back to investment advisor, where do we start with that? Because I definitely can see how, there are certain factors that you would need for that person who's gonna basically be all over your money. So like, where do we start with actually finding that person? Or do we kind of have to shop around?
Well, you do have to shop around. That's how you shop that I would like for you to think about. So the first thing is to understand what your goals are, what it is you want to accomplish. That's the first thing. You can't employ any professional correctly unless you know what it is you want to do. And then you have to figure out what resources you have to do what it is you want to do. So if you're talking about an investment advisor and you have $200,000 to invest, and the investment advisor you're going to visit requires at least a minimum of $1 million, or they won't take you, that is not a good match. So when you're asking around, hey, who's a good investment advisor, ask some of these questions. Did they ask you or did they have you create a risk versus return profile? Is there a minimum amount that they're required to handle for you? What are their fees? Because that's going to be important. How good are they with people in my situation? See if you can find references that are enough like you so that you feel comfortable that they can take someone in your current position to the position you want to be in or the achievement you want to accomplish. So yes, you're shopping around, but you're shopping around with intention and specificity, if that makes sense.
It does, yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, I wanted to say, Julie, all of what you said is really true. I wanted to kind of comment that you want to meet someone and work with them that they educate you, not just telling you what to do, so that you understand exactly what's going on. And if it seems like someone maybe is talking down to you or not really having the patience with you, that is really a red flag, because you can sign on the dotted line based on what they said and what they're presenting. But at the end of the day, it's still your responsibility with whatever transaction or situation you're in. So you really want to feel comfortable with that person.
You want to feel comfortable. You want to trust them. There is no hard and fast absolute rule, except if you are listening to that small, still voice or your gut or whatever you want to call it, and it's telling you, run like Forrest out of this situation, then you should listen to that. But you should also be objective and ask questions. If your professional is speaking in a condescending way to you, that is not acceptable of any professional. You should not be working with them. If you have expressed the desire to want to learn more about your situation and they do not respond in an increasingly positive way to help you become educated, that is a problem. There are some people that don't want to be educated. That professional may be used to people who don't wish to become educated. But if you express a sincere desire to become more educated in that concept, then without a doubt, they should help you become more educated. And if they don't, that's a red sign.